Momentum. It is what the PlayStation brand has managed to maintain for 7 years now, but in the rapidly evolving games industry, there is never a guarantee whether that momentum will last. It came out of nowhere, but a pretty major bombshell was dropped last week when Microsoft announced it had acquired ZeniMax, parent company of popular game publisher Bethesda. Gigantic franchises like Doom, Fallout and The Elder Scrolls now lie in the hands of Phil Spencer, fully in control of them to do with as he wishes. Things honestly weren't looking very good for Xbox up until now. Months away from the release of these next-generation consoles, their recent showcase had been relatively weak, made up of rather substandard content, relying almost solely on CGI trailers for the games that weren't, and featuring a demo of Halo Infinite that would be met with such underwhelming reception it forced the company to delay the game into the next year. On the opposite side of the spectrum, PlayStation initially seemed to be sailing the usual course. Amazing looking exclusives, an inspiring design for a brand new console, and a message that highlighted the importance of generations and their technical advancements. Well, excitement had dominated the conversation up until exactly 10 minutes after their most recent presentation, when a number of eyebrow-raising articles suddenly hit the internet. Games would become even more expensive, and most notably, it turned out that first-party titles like Spider-Man Miles Morales and Horizon Forbidden West would also be crossing over to the PS4 after all. Simply said, Jim Ryan lied, and his entire narrative that PlayStation believed in developing for next-gen only because old consoles would only hold PS5 games back, well, completely fell apart. You could definitely say that the recent developments have leveled the playing field again somewhat, and I honestly think it's for the better, because after all, competition only leads to better products for everyone. That being said, let's not kid ourselves either. Momentum isn't this easily lost, and with their rock-solid collection of development studios as well as games, I'm sure that nothing will stop PlayStation from starting off in the lead again, as the insane chaos around its pre-orders have already shown us. But the board is set and the pieces are moving. It's an exciting time, and I can't wait to find out where things are heading next. Most interestingly, both Sony and Microsoft clearly have their own approaches this time around, and we now possess all the information required to paint a clear picture of the next generation's first phase. With just over a month to go until launch, internet debate is at its peak, and the first group of early adopters have come to their own initial verdicts. Still, the most important question is easily ignored, but it's the one that keeps me busy the most. Which strategy will ultimately prove best in the long term? For as long as we've had video game consoles, platform holders have made the mistake of focusing on the most trivial features to separate their systems from others. Seasoned gamers will remember the infinite amounts of filler sections during E3 press conferences, battles being fought out over the mainstream gamer and the living room with motion controllers, Kinect, media services and TV integrations. Fortunately, we are at a point in time now where nearly every game company finally seems to get it, and that obviously it's always been about gamers, and thus, shocking I know, video games at the end of the day. Now, in this regard, it's obvious that PlayStation currently has the advantage, whereas Microsoft is the one with a lot of ground to make up. High-quality AAA exclusives were severely lacking on the Xbox One, and it's by far the biggest reason for the sales gap they faced as a result. Almost their entire business plan now seems to revolve around Game Pass, which is undoubtedly an idea with an infinite amount of potential. However, don't be mistaken, for that plan to be successful, the exact same requirement applies. This generation will mark the war for content. So, sticking with Xbox a little longer, the problem is that predicting its future games output, as well as overall quality, is still like gazing into a crystal ball a little bit. We just don't know yet. Uncertainty still defines public perception, despite there definitely being plenty of cause for optimism. Adding up all their recent acquisitions, Xbox's first-party network has genuinely become a force to be reckoned with. We just have to start seeing the first titles from these new studios now. Sadly, the schedule at this moment is still looking a little dreary. Hellblade 2 isn't coming out anytime soon, judging by the fact Ninja Theory announced it will use Unreal Engine 5 due out in preview next year. Similar assumptions can be made for Obsidian's RPG Avowed and Playground Games' Fable. Both of these games have reputable development teams behind them. It would be fair to view them as potential system sellers, but they were only able to give us a CGI trailer thus far, indicating how early in the creative process they still are. Moreover, some games still evoke a lot of doubt. Everwild's visual concept looked very promising, until creator Rare admitted not quite having an idea yet what the game was actually going to end up playing like. I already mentioned Halo Infinite, which was forcefully scrapped as a launch title and taken back to the drawing board. God knows how much time 343 decides will be needed to meet the fans' understandably high expectations at last. On the bright side, there is now the addition of Bethesda's entire portfolio, a move so drastic it should forever end all the yelling that Xbox has no games anymore. Microsoft Game Studios just upped its total number of outfits to a whopping 24. For reference, that's 9 more compared to PlayStation's 15. Going with an average development cycle of say 4 years, a new first-party Xbox exclusive could be released periodically every 2 months now. That being said, quality will always be the decisive factor, and it's where Bethesda brings cause for both hope as well as doubt. On one hand, getting a game like The Elder Scrolls 6 exclusive to Xbox alone would be killer. It is bound to drive system sales, let alone Game Pass subscriptions, if you're giving people the opportunity to play it across PC, Xbox or mobile for just $10 a month. At the same time, Bethesda itself has been dealing with plenty of its own controversies as of late. Can it save the Fallout franchise after a somewhat underwhelming Fallout 4 and the absolute debacle that was Fallout 76? Will Starfield, supposed to be turned into its major new franchise, truly get the jumpstart that'll be required? Their creation engine is now commonly agreed to be extremely outdated, and it will need quite the upgrade. Good news is that Todd Howard recently confirmed it's getting that major overhaul, but as for what the outcome will be, we'll obviously have to wait and see. Wait for E3 was the slogan thrown around so much this generation, it became a total joke, a sign of the Xbox's fanbase absolute desperation for better days to be ahead. I almost can't believe I have to go by faith once more, but I really like to think that the situation will finally be looking up very soon, and perhaps drastically so. Now, on the PlayStation side of things, well, it's like back to business as usual. The PS5's first-party launch lineup is admirably sizable, consisting of Miles Morales, Sackboy, Destruction All-Stars, and the incredible-looking Demon's Souls remake. On top of that, Sony has also secured Godfall as a console exclusive for the foreseeable time. Safe to say, there is plenty to choose for people buying a PlayStation 5 on day one, already easily making it a much better launch over the one we had with Knack and Killzone 7 years ago. It should be more than enough to make sure that those 11 to 15 million units Sony has been able to produce for the first few months will be selling out. But to maintain its steady sales, what will be even more important is to keep rolling out content on a consistent basis after launch. Of course, we do know that the company has got what it takes to keep up a good flow. Ratchet & Clank is on the way, so is Horizon Forbidden West, and even the next God of War is currently scheduled for 2021, though I certainly have my doubts whether the latter title isn't just a sneaky, dishonest promise to keep demand high. If the game was seriously this close to being done, well, let's just say I find merely giving us a logo and some meaningless dialogue a dubious choice. Nonetheless, the game will certainly be a smash hit, and consider me excited as hell. Other than that, we'll have to wait and see what else they'll have in store for us next year. Naughty Dog may still have a standalone Last of Us Factions component in the works, but their new IP should still be a few years away. Similar expectations can be had for Sucker Punch, Sony Bend, and all the other in-house studios, which finished their last projects only recently. As far as the PS5 goes, I think that's where its biggest mystery currently lies. What are we gonna see around the second year of its life cycle, knowing that these other teams shouldn't be quite ready to deliver anything yet? It could mean more second-party deals, like what happened with Godfall, but those obviously wouldn't be very effective in the long run. There is room for new studio acquisitions to be made. I think Microsoft's purchasing of Bethesda has put significant pressure on Sony to consider expanding their own network even more. I've already made lists in the past with some of my favorite options, including Bluepoint Games, Giant Sparrow, Kojima Productions, and a few more. There's one new addition we definitely do know of, and it's a team in San Diego built fully from the ground up. Rumors still indicate that they'll be responsible for the continuation of the Uncharted franchise, but nothing is set in stone. Simultaneously, I gotta say, looking at it, I find it a little bewildering how Sony allowed this need for expansion to creep up on them in the first place. With how successful the PS4 has been for them, it's baffled me to see how carelessly Sony has let some of its talented longtime partners slip through their fingers as of late. Facebook recently bought Ready at Dawn, pretty much guaranteeing we'll never see the potential an Order 1886 sequel could have had realized, nor a possibly fantastic new IP from a team that's always had PlayStation in its DNA, delivering great spin-offs for popular PS franchises. But it's also Quantic Dream, known for Detroit Become Human and Heavy Rain, that has not only abandoned its decade-long partnership tradition with Sony, but even indicated some resentment towards them, going by David Cage's tweets. Fumito Ueda's Gen Design is going multi-platform. Supermassive Games was never given an opportunity, despite Until Dawn being received well. It's just a long list of unnecessary breakups this generation that were a real shame to see. What we are now left with are by no means bad franchises, in fact they are the ones that financially performed best, but another fear of mine is how they've all started to feel a little samey as well. Horizon Zero Dawn, Ghost of Tsushima, Days Gone, don't get me wrong, all good to great games, and some fans probably won't want to hear this criticism from me about them, but they're also borrowing the exact same template from each other, one which by the way is already applied by a whole bunch of third-party open world games as well. All that I'm asking is, where is the variety these days? As a huge fan of linear games, PlayStation used to especially excel at the Hollywood blockbuster, the 10 to 20 hour story-driven adventure that entertained from start to finish and oozed a level of polish not found anywhere else. You wouldn't get these games from a Ubisoft, EA or Activision, and thus it made PlayStation stick out. Now, even fan-favorite studios like Naughty Dog and Sony Santa Monica, our last beacons of hope in this regard, have begun adopting a much wider design or openly discussed abandoning linearity for the open world genre in the near future. And while I fully support them heading into these new alleyways, I would find it disappointing to see a vastly reduced linear games catalog from PlayStation overall. Maybe I'm just part of a dying breed who recognizes the value in a linear experience and that a bigger sense of control or freedom in movement doesn't always equal a better story or gameplay experience. Alas, it'll ultimately be up to the fans to let PlayStation know which genres and game types they will want more of. Now on to something the PlayStation audience seems to be universally unhappy about, which is the news that game prices will see an increase to a maximum of €80 and equivalents across the world. The news sparked an understandably negative reaction, though I am personally torn whether this is truly where the real issue lies. If there is one trend that we've seen over the last decade, it's that games have unquestionably become more and more expensive to make. Worlds became bigger, graphics are approaching near photorealism, and the team sizes required to make these kinds of productions possible have gone through the roof. When I look at some of the exceptional exclusives PlayStation has given us, in some cases like a God of War, doing the rare thing and refusing to add lazy or unneeded DLC after the fact, then I can only respect what it took to provide us this game, and I'd easily be willing to pay a slightly higher price. However, for me personally, that wouldn't quite go for the yearly FIFA, for a copy-paste Ubisoft open world, or any game for that matter if it doesn't breathe that same amount of passion put into it. The problem is that most of the time, these games not only dare to charge the exact same price, gamers are willing to pay it. Hell, they'll spend even more money afterwards on card packs and other microtransactions, which only justifies these publishers in their propositions. At the end of the day, it's the market that decides. I believe that's a good thing, but that gamers aren't always aware of their own influence on it, nor are they the most principled of people when it comes to these things. I guess what I'm saying is that I don't necessarily blame Sony for increasing prices. If I feel a game is worth that money, then I'll pay what it deserves. At the same time, I've already been making conscious decisions to start speaking with my wallet more. I choose to support the games I truly believe deserve it, those that need to be made more, and I wait for price drops when it comes to those that don't. Now, all I can do is hope others with me will be doing the exact same. From a general perspective though, it's where the big difference in strategy between the two giants lies. PlayStation is focused on the old school methods. Sell lots of PlayStations, make great exclusive games, charge high prices and count on great returns. CEO Jim Ryan was recently quoted to confirm this by saying, "We are not going down the road of putting newly released titles into a subscription model. These games cost many millions of dollars, well over $100 million to develop. We just don't see that as sustainable." By saying this, he is obviously referring to Microsoft, who have decided to approach the gaming market in a radically different way. The company has begun looking at Xbox as more than just a console. It's an ecosystem that it aims to make everyone a part of. Thinking that selling lots of Series X or S machines is still a top priority for them would be misinterpreting their goal. Microsoft no longer cares whether you're playing on Xbox, on PC, or even mobile. It's about allowing players to choose their own preferred platforms without suffering any financial consequences for the choices that they'll make. This strategy is visible in every action they are taking, like with their own console lineup, consisting of both an expensive system for the hardcore and a cheaper alternative for those who just want to play high-end games at a very affordable price. Does it make a difference which one people buy? No, profits are barely made on hardware in the first place. The real money is made from games as well as services. As long as they can keep you locked into their ecosystem, they will be accomplishing their goal. And that's where their actual revenue source comes into play, which is Xbox Game Pass, a monthly subscription model that provides them a much more controllable cash flow. As of right now, there are 15 million active members paying up to $10 per month. The numbers consistently keep climbing upwards, with the company continuously adding popular new third-party titles and promising to add all their own AAA exclusives to the program on day one. On paper, it certainly sounds like the less costly choice for gamers, but there are some clear ramifications to keep in mind as well. For example, relying so heavily on Game Pass, Microsoft now has more of an incentive than ever to design all their upcoming games around it. To make sure you'll stay subscribed to the service, they would love for you to play these games for extended amounts of time. Most likely, that'll mean more games as a service, more co-op and multiplayer components, and more post-launch content for single-player games, so you'll never truly be done. We can already see this in their plans for Halo Infinite's life to span 10 years, and in some of the online elements even a game like Playground's Fable is rumored to have. Seeing myself as someone with more of a traditional mindset, I know that for me, this is where my biggest concerns arise. I am mostly interested in finite single-player adventures, and I move on quickly from one game to the next. That being said, my conclusion, as discussed with PlayStation, remains one and the same. It'll be fully up to consumers to decide what the future should be bringing us. As previous generations have proved, winning the console war can be all about communication. We saw it 7 years ago, when Microsoft made the mistake of positioning Xbox One as an all-in-one entertainment device rather than a console simply targeting hardcore gamers. They stumbled on their messaging over DRM and always-online policies, and when they finally realized their missteps, it no longer mattered that they had corrected them, that they were quick to remove Kinect from the box, even their price point, and revert all their looked-down-upon plans. 6 months into the generation, you could argue Xbox One and PS4 had nearly become one and the same product, with Microsoft even possibly having an edge in terms of its early games lineup, but it didn't matter because the damage had already been done. But looking at this very moment, as of right now, it's almost like the roles have reversed. Messaging around the PS5 could have been so simple and consistent. It actually appeared to be for a while, until just weeks ago, when the whole narrative came tumbling down. First up, it was confirmed that Spider-Man Miles Morales, Sackboy's Big Adventure, and Horizon Forbidden West will not be exclusive to the PlayStation 5, but in fact arrive day and date on PS4 as well, with more exclusives not ruled out to come over too. From a business perspective, the move makes sense. With over 110 million PlayStation 4s out in the wild, it would be a missed opportunity merely to sell your game to a portion of the player base who decided to make the transition early. Back in the days, the thought process behind doing this might have been to prevent people from jumping ship to a competitor's next-gen console, but I have a feeling Sony simply didn't see Microsoft's nearby games lineup and Play Anywhere approach to form much of a direct threat anymore. Many awesome new franchises were just established, and when games like Ghost of Tsushima, Days Gone, and God of War eventually receive their sequels, they feel confident that players will stick with PlayStation when they eventually upgrade anyway. However, who this has understandably sparked irritation with are some of the dedicated fans who are planning on investing in the next gen early. Many feel that these exclusives will now be held back in terms of features in making use of all the available new power. The reasons are not entirely unjustified, because Sony themselves had claimed that would be the case months ago. "We believe in generations" were the literal words coming out of Jim Ryan's mouth. We believe that when you go through all the trouble of creating a next-gen console, that it should include features and benefits that the previous generation does not include. And that, in our view, people should make games that can make the most of those features. We are thinking that it is time to give the PlayStation community something new, something different, something that can really only be enjoyed on PS5. DualShock 4 won't work with PS5 in order for all games to take advantage of the new capabilities and features we're bringing to the platform. Now, listen, do I believe in all this marketing speech in the first place? No. Having been around long enough, I know better than to blindly take these things for granted anymore. Although previously differences were surely noticeable between games developed for cross-generation release and games that weren't, I think now those differences won't be as prevalent as long as PS5 is the main targeted development platform, now that system architectures have also remained the same. That being said, Sony lied to its consumers once more, and that I can only condemn. But here's the thing, the moment you create these inconsistencies, you also invite people to go back to previous statements and point out your hypocrisy. Many fans have referred to a making-of video for Horizon Zero Dawn, where developer Guerrilla admitted it was going to allow you to fly mounts in the original game, but couldn't thanks to PS4's limited hardware. They had to save that idea for a later point in time. Well, in theory, it still shouldn't be possible now that Forbidden West will be forced to run on PS4 as well. I'm sure that they may still achieve it, and they'll have some excuse ready for it, but like I said, honesty has surely been thrown out of the window. Microsoft's direction of Play Anywhere was a smart move, as it forced Sony into this really awkward spot. It's like they can't make their mind up anymore. On one hand, they know how valuable their exclusives are in driving system sales, but on the other hand, their selectiveness when it comes to cross-gen or exclusivity and possibly releasing them on the PC later like Horizon, it is bound to lead to a lot of confusion as well as frustration. Compare this to Xbox, where you can play all their own games across all devices, where you're guaranteed every single one of them to hit Game Pass on day one. You know exactly what you're gonna get. The main problem with Sony's strategy versus that of Microsoft is that as of now, there is just no consistency. Because if Miles Morales and Horizon Forbidden West are coming to the PS4, then why isn't the Demon's Souls remake and the new God of War? I understand that it may not be a smart move to go all in, nor stick entirely to the old ways, but I can tell you now, this lack of clarity is not going to be appreciated by fans. Despite a limited amount of truly next-generation games available at launch, neither PlayStation nor Xbox fans will have to worry about a complete lack of content to play thanks to backwards compatibility. Both consoles will be able to play nearly every game of the previous generation, and both will be able to use their so-called boost mode to iron out optimization issues and frame rate drops should they have been present in the games before. However, that obviously doesn't mean each game will automatically perform as well as it possibly could. A game locked to 30 frames per second will still be 30 frames a second in the occasion they do not receive an additional update. However, for me, it's the possible ways for these updates to be facilitated, where publishers will be given much more freedom than I had initially hoped. Both Sony and Microsoft will allow third-party developers to choose either to patch their games or charge you for a separate next-gen version with all the improvements you would want. In case you'd like the optimal experience for some of your favorite games with higher resolutions, frame rates and improved graphics, then chances are you'll be required to pay once again. Now for this, Microsoft has introduced what is called Smart Delivery, a program guaranteeing you will get the best version, and it has promised to use for all its own games. As far as Sony goes though, they are once again not as consistent as I'd like them to be. Right now, all we can go by is Spider-Man, as there have been no other announcements as of yet regarding any of its other exclusives. If you already own the original game, you can of course still play it on the PS5, but if you want 4K resolutions and an optional 60 FPS performance mode, then it will be locked behind the $70 Miles Morales Ultimate Edition for now. To make the additional price tag seem a little bit more warranted, Insomniac has also improved a lot of in-game assets. Character models have been reworked, shadows, lighting, and the amount of render objects on screen will be better, but to me it doesn't change that I find it a disappointing choice. It makes me genuinely worried, not necessarily that every Sony exclusive will follow in Spider-Man's footsteps, but that some of them may not even bother updating their game at all, knowing people wouldn't be as prepared to pay an additional fee anyway. As someone who has been anticipating to play Uncharted 4 and Bloodborne in the way I think they are truly meant to be played, I can only say fingers crossed that they will get the updates they deserve. But coming to the end of this video, November is already fast approaching, and I can't believe how close we are to the beginning of this exciting new era. The build-up we've seen towards it certainly deserves to be called unconventional, and I'm especially noticing myself that my perspective has drastically changed in the last couple of weeks alone. I'll be very honest, up until very recently, Microsoft's strategy had yet to really convince me, to the point where even 2 months ago, after watching their latest showcase, I had trouble seeing through the fog. For years, Phil Spencer has had this habit of talking rather than showing, and while I understood his vision nor doubted that it could ever work, the content just kept staying away. After their recent move of acquiring Bethesda, however, doubling down on game production and showing me that they're committed to the future, their outlook has finally started looking a lot more rosy. The big separator as of now remains how Sony doesn't waste any time telling people what it is they want, rather they just give it to them. On paper, the PlayStation 5 and Xbox Series X are very similar devices, but by going with the futuristic console design, the DualSense with its couple of fascinating features, a new UI that's yet to be revealed, and an overall message that sets this device apart as a new generation, you just end up feeling much more inclined to be excited and to upgrade. I think simply that, combined with the even more important prospect of many amazing exclusive games to come, will be enough to provide lots of momentum during the first phase of its life cycle. But behind their compelling products and focus on what matters, it's also clear they are seeing Microsoft's vision and are feeling somewhat threatened by it. They've begun a PC release experiment with Horizon and have promised 4 more to come. They've introduced the PS Plus collection, their own less impactful version of Game Pass, limited to backwards compatible games, and they are selling a digital-only version of the PS5 to combat the Xbox Series S cheaper price. Microsoft has clearly forced Sony to slowly move into their direction, but with substitute offerings that just aren't quite it yet. How I see it, PlayStation is starting off in the lead, yet they're already playing catch-up in many regards. At the same time, Microsoft is the one with something to prove. They finally have the studios, now it's time to show us they can match the quality of PlayStation's games. We still have a long road ahead of us, but if there's anything that excites me, it's that the outcome of this battle is far from decided. Thanks a lot everybody for watching my video on the next generation of consoles. Let me know in the comments, have you managed to get one of yours pre-ordered? Because I know a lot of people have been running into issues. Which one are you getting, of course? And how do you feel about the whole battle currently playing out in front of us? And where do you see things go in the future? So next week I'm going to be having a video up about something a little bit different. We're going to go back to the original Call of Duty Black Ops from 2010. Because, of course, Cold War is right around the corner, and all the recent single-player trailers and the fact that it was, supposed to be this direct sequel to that game got me kind of nostalgic. And so I played the original campaign again to see how it had held up. And, I figured it would be cool to make a video to kind of discuss what made it so memorable for many of us, and why to this day we still look back very fondly at that, game from 2010. So if you enjoy all the content that I make, then of course please consider supporting me at patreon.com/robingaming. For just $1 a month, you get early access to every single video of mine, as well as scripts. You also show up in the credits, for example, that's a reward, but you make it possible for me to make videos like this. So patreon.com/robingaming, and then for now I'd like to thank you a lot for watching, and hope to see you again in the next one.